A wealthy couple adopts a starving orphan. A fairy tale ending? No. It was a cold-blooded business transaction. They didn't want a son, they wanted the state welfare checks to fuel their luxury vacations. But they made one fatal calculation error: the silent child they locked in the basement wasn't just a victim. He was a hidden genius waiting to burn their empire to the ground. In a world where greed often wears a designer suit and innocence is treated like garbage, it's easy to lose faith in humanity. We've all felt that stinging injustice when the wicked seem to win while the good hearts are left in the dust. But today, the tables turn. This is the story of Christian Sanders, an arrogant billionaire blinded by status, and Chloe Sanchez, a maid whose poverty hid a warrior's spirit. It is a roller coaster of betrayal, unconditional love, and the ultimate vindication. You are about to witness a chess match between ruthless scammers and a brilliant child who turned their own home security system into a weapon of justice. But be warned, before the triumph, there is the tragedy. You will see a heart-shattering frame-up, a billionaire's devastating mistake, and a lonely walk into the dark night that will make you cry tears of rage. The stakes couldn't be higher: a child's life hangs in the balance. If you believe that karma eventually comes for us all, then you are in the right place. Hit that subscribe button to join our community of truth seekers. Like this video if you're ready to see justice served cold, and let's dive into the shocking truth behind the perfect facade. The decision to proceed with the adoption was never about expanding their family with love. It was a cold, calculated business move designed solely to exploit the system. This greedy couple, draped in unearned luxury, viewed the welfare checks not as aid for a child, but as a steady revenue stream to fund their vices and vanity. They were sophisticated scammers, treating the arrival of the quiet, wide-eyed orphan as a transaction rather than a life-changing commitment to nurture a soul. It was a massive fraud hidden behind the manicured hedges of their suburban fortress, where the shocking truth was buried deep. They didn't want a son, they wanted a paycheck. The ink on the adoption papers was barely dry before they began calculating exactly how much profit they could squeeze from the state, viewing the boy merely as an asset in their portfolio of deceit. When the boy arrived, he was met not with the warmth of a mother's embrace, but with the damp chill of a basement corner and a list of draconian rules. It was absolutely heartbreaking to watch him shrink into himself, realizing within hours that he was utterly alone in a house full of people who saw him as a burden. However, the house held a silent, watchful guardian: the maid, Chloe Sanchez. She saw the betrayal in the couple's eyes every time they ignored the child's hunger or mocked his ragged clothes while they dined on gourmet meals. Chloe Sanchez, though struggling with her own crushing poverty, possessed a richness of spirit the couple lacked. She quietly stepped in, becoming the invisible mother figure, risking her job to smuggle him food and offer the unconditional love he was being denied by his legal guardians. Chloe Sanchez knew that raising him in secret was a dangerous game, one that required constant vigilance and nerves of steel. If the couple found out she was coddling their source of income, she would be fired instantly, leaving the boy defenseless against their neglect. It was a twisted rich man poor woman scenario, where the wealthy were spiritual paupers and the help held the moral high ground. She washed his clothes by hand to hide them from the laundry pile and whispered stories to him late at night, creating a bubble of safety within the humiliated existence he was forced to endure. She sensed this was her destiny, to stand between this innocent soul and the cruelty of the world, even if it meant living in constant fear of being discovered. As weeks turned into months, the couple's greed only grew, their demands becoming more erratic and their neglect more brazen. They staged elaborate photos for social media, captioning them with lies about their challenging journey, while Chloe Sanchez did the heavy lifting in the shadows. The boy, however, was beginning to show signs that he was more than just a quiet victim waiting to be rescued. He watched the couple with an intensity that was unsettling, his mind working in ways Chloe Sanchez was just starting to understand. He wasn't just surviving, he was observing, analyzing the scammers with a gaze that hinted at a genius child hiding behind the trauma. He would fix broken appliances the couple discarded, his small fingers moving with a dexterity that seemed impossible for his age. Instant regret would surely come for the couple if they knew what the boy was capable of, but for now, they were blinded by their own arrogance. Chloe Sanchez marveled at the boy's intellect, realizing that this was a social experiment gone wrong, a brilliant mind trapped in a cage of neglect. She saw the spark in his eyes when he solved complex puzzles on scraps of paper, a silent vindication of his worth that the world hadn't seen yet. But the walls were closing and the couple was getting reckless, demanding more money from the state and cutting deeper into the boy's necessities. Chloe knew this fragile equilibrium couldn't last forever, and the tension in the house was becoming suffocating. The atmosphere in the house was heavy with impending doom, a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. The couple discussed new ways to exploit the system, oblivious to the fact that their actions were setting off a chain reaction that would eventually summon justice to their doorstep. Chloe Sanchez held the boy close, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep, unaware that their story was about to collide with a billionaire named Christian Sanders. Far away, in a high-rise office, red flags were being raised on a specific account, and the gears of fate were grinding toward a confrontation that would expose everything. The boy looked at Chloe, and for the first time, he smiled a knowing smile that suggested he had a plan of his own. The air in the house grew colder, not from the weather, but from the chilling realization that the couple's greed had no bottom. Chloe observed the boy sketching schematics on napkins, complex diagrams that looked nothing like children's drawings. She didn't know it yet, but he was mapping out the security grid of the house, turning his prison into a puzzle to be solved. The couple, busy spending the boy's welfare money on jewelry, had no idea they were living with a prodigy who was documenting every sin. The stage was set for a collision, and the silence in the hallway felt like the deep breath before a scream. While the world saw a quiet, withdrawn orphan, Chloe Sanchez saw the sparks of a genius child igniting in the darkness of the basement. It started with small things, broken clocks ticking again, the microwave repaired with nothing but a paperclip, but soon escalated into undeniable brilliance. The boy, whose name was barely spoken by his parents without a sneer, found solace in the logic of numbers and the honesty of machines. It was life-changing for Chloe to witness amidst the squalor of his living conditions. His mind was a palace of intellect.
She became his student and his protector, bringing him discarded books and newspapers, which he devoured with hunger that surpassed his need for food. The bond between them deepened, forged in the fires of shared adversity and the secret of his intelligence. Chloe Sanchez was the only person who showed him unconditional love, the only one who looked at him and saw a human being rather than a paycheck. They developed a silent language, a series of glances and nods that allowed them to communicate right under the noses of the scammers. This connection was his lifeline, preventing the bitterness of his situation from poisoning his heart. He wasn't just hiding his intelligence to survive, he was hiding it to protect Chloe, knowing that if the couple discovered his gift, they would exploit it or, worse, punish her for nurturing it. In the quiet hours of night, the basement transformed into a classroom where the roles were reversed. The boy would explain the patterns of the stock market he saw in the newspaper scraps, or how the home security system was flawed. Chloe Sanchez listened with awe, realizing that this adoption had brought a prodigy into a den of thieves. It was a social experiment of nature versus nurture playing out in real time. Could his brilliance survive the toxicity of his environment? Chloe vowed that it would. She saw his potential as a beacon of hope, a promise of vindication against the cruelty that surrounded them. However, the boy's genius came with a heavy burden of awareness. He understood exactly how the fraud worked. He knew the specific dates the checks arrived and how the couple forged receipts to justify their spending. It was heartbreaking for Chloe to see a child burdened with such adult knowledge, his innocence stripped away by the greed of others. Yet this knowledge was power. He began to compile a mental dossier of their crimes, his memory as sharp as a steel trap. He whispered to Chloe that one day he would make it right, that justice was a mathematical equation that eventually had to balance out. The contrast was stark. The couple upstairs, consumed by stupidity and greed, and the boy downstairs, radiating a quiet, terrifying intelligence. Chloe Sanchez often wondered what would happen if a billionaire or a scholar discovered him, but for now, he was her secret. She mended his clothes and held him when the weight of his reality became too much, proving that rich man, poor woman dynamics didn't apply to matters of the heart. She was poor in coin but wealthy in love. The couple was rich in assets but bankrupt in soul. The boy anchored himself to her kindness, the only stable thing in his chaotic world. As his confidence grew, so did the risks he was willing to take. He started leaving small clues, subtle manipulations of the household electronics that drove the couple mad with confusion, a petty revenge that brought a small smirk to his face. Chloe warned him to be careful, fearing instant regret if he pushed too hard. But the boy was playing a long game, a chess match where his opponents didn't even know they were playing. He told Chloe, "They think I'm nothing, and that is my greatest weapon." The bond they shared was about to be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. Chloe Sanchez sensed a shift in the wind, a feeling that their secret world was about to be invaded. The boy, with his preternatural intuition, felt it too. He started hiding his notes more carefully, wiping the digital footprints of his late-night research. They were a team of two against the world, holding on to belief that destiny had brought them together for a reason, and that reason was about to walk to the front door in a tailored suit. Christian Sanders was not just a billionaire. He was a man on a mission, driven by a personal history that made the welfare of children his obsession. As the head of the Child Welfare Foundation, he didn't just sign checks, he hunted down corruption with the tenacity of a wolf. When the data on the couple's adoption case flagged multiple inconsistencies, Christian decided to bypass the bureaucrats and conduct a field audit himself. He arrived in a sleek, black sedan that looked like a spaceship landed in the driveway, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere from domestic laziness to high-stakes tension. He was there to uncover fraud, and his reputation for exposing scammers preceded him like a storm front. The couple, caught off guard in their pajamas at noon, scrambled to put on their masks of respectability. Christian Sanders stood in the foyer, his eyes scanning the room with a laser-like focus that missed nothing. He smelled the stale air of neglect beneath the heavy perfume of the house. He was looking for the shocking truth he knew was hiding in the margins of their pristine paperwork. To him, this wasn't just a job, it was a crusade for justice. Every dollar stolen was a meal taken from a child's mouth, and he had zero tolerance for parasites. The couple's nervous laughter and sweaty palms only fueled his suspicion. Chloe Sanchez watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart hammering against her ribs. She recognized Christian Sanders from the news. He was a titan of industry, a man who could crush this household with a single phone call. But she also saw the cold, hard set of his jaw. He looked like a man who had seen too much betrayal to trust easily. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell him about the genius child hiding in the basement, but fear paralyzed her. She was just a maid, the invisible help. And in her experience, men like Christian didn't listen to women like her. She feared being swept away as collateral damage in his war against the couple. Christian's interrogation was brutal and precise. He asked about school records, medical checkups, and dietary plans, firing questions faster than the couple could invent lies. He demanded to see the boy, his voice leaving no room for argument. The couple hesitated, exchanging panicked glances, before the wife scurried off to fetch the child, undoubtedly to threaten him into silence. Christian remained in the living room, his gaze landing on Chloe Sanchez. He didn't see a protector. He saw a woman in worn clothes standing silently amidst the crime scene, and he made a snap judgment that would cost them both dearly. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Christian Sanders moved with the predatory grace of a panther, touching the expensive vases and looking at the dust-free shelves, noting the disparity between the couple's lifestyle and the reported expenses for the child. He was building a case in his mind, piece by damning piece. He turned to Chloe, his eyes cold. "And you?" he asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You must be part of the domestic bliss." It was a stinging remark, grouping her with the scammers, a moment of humiliated silence that burned her cheeks. When the boy was finally brought out, he looked clean but terrified, clearly coached within an inch of his life. Christian knelt down, trying to soften his demeanor, but the boy, conditioned to fear adults, recoiled. Christian stood up, his suspicion deepening. He looked at the couple, then at Chloe, and finally at the boy. The pieces didn't fit. The boy's eyes darted at Chloe for a microsecond of plea for help, but Christian missed it, focused instead on the couple's sweating foreheads. He sensed the fraud, but he couldn't yet see the mechanism or the depth of the abuse. The visit was far from over. Christian announced he would be staying for a thorough inspection, a declaration that hit the couple like a physical blow. They were trapped. Chloe Sanchez retreated to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she prepared tea. She realized that Christian Sanders was her only hope for vindication, but he was also a dangerous variable. If he misread the situation, he could destroy everything. The destiny of the boy hung in the balance, suspended between the arrogance of a billionaire and the greed of his tormentors. Christian Sanders, for all his business acumen, possessed a fatal flaw. He believed poverty often bred corruption. As he stalked through the house, his interactions with Chloe Sanchez were colored by betrayal from his own past. He treated her with cold arrogance, mistaking her silence for guilt and her worn-out clothes as evidence of her complicity in the couple's fraud. He saw her not as the boy's savior, but as a hireling who turned a blind eye for a paycheck. It takes a village to raise a child. He sneered at her as she scrubbed the counter, or in this case, a village to rob one. It was a classic rich man, poor woman misunderstanding, fueled by prejudice. Christian didn't see the calluses on her hands from working extra hours to buy the boy vitamins. He only saw a woman serving scammers. He interrogated her while she worked, firing accusations disguised as questions. "Do you sleep well at night?" he asked, watching her polish the silver. Chloe bit her lip, holding back tears of frustration. The shocking truth was screaming inside her, but she knew that one wrong word would get her fired and the boy isolated. She chose to absorb his disdain to maintain her access to the child. The insults cut deep. Christian mocked her lack of education, assuming she was simple-minded because she didn't defend herself. He didn't realize that her silence was a fortress built to protect the genius child she loved. Every time he belittled her, he pushed her further into a corner, unaware that he was attacking the only ally he had in that house. It was heartbreaking to watch a man seeking justice blindly attacking the embodiment of innocence. Be honest, would you have the strength to stay silent while someone insulted your integrity, just to protect another? Chloe Sanchez's composure was a testament to her strength. She served him coffee with a steady hand, despite his rude comments about the quality of the help. She knew the welfare money funded the beans, but she brewed it with care, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he would see past the uniform. But Christian was blinded by his crusade. He saw the world in black and white, the scammers and their enablers. He couldn't conceive that a maid would be the moral anchor in a house of wealthy thieves. The boy watched these interactions from the shadows, his small fists clenched. He wanted to run out and scream that Chloe was a hero, that she was the unconditional love in his life. But he adhered to their plan. He saw the pain in Chloe's eyes and added it to his mental ledger against the couple and now, against Christian too. The billionaire was failing the test of character that the boy was silently administering. Christian thought he was the investigator, but in the eyes of the child, he was just another bully in a suit. As the day wore on, Christian's arrogance became almost unbearable. He criticized the cleanliness of the house, the organization of the pantry, looking for any excuse to exert dominance. Chloe took every barb, every sneer, with quiet dignity that began to annoy him. He wanted her to crack, to confess, to give him the smoking gun, but she gave him nothing but polite nods. "I am just doing my job, sir," she whispered, a phrase that infuriated him because he believed her job was aiding and abetting a crime. The tragedy of the situation was palpable. Here were two people who wanted the same thing, the safety of the boy standing on opposite sides of a chasm of misunderstanding. Christian Sanders, the champion of the downtrodden, was trampling on the very person who was doing the work he claimed to value. Instant regret was waiting in the wings for him. But for now, he felt justified in his cruelty. He didn't know that the woman he was humiliating was the only thing standing between the boy and total despair. Chloe Sanchez silently endured the barrage of Christian Sanders' insults, turning her heart into a shield to protect the boy. It was an act of unconditional love that requires strength far greater than physical power. When Christian accused her of feasting on the crumbs of the couple's fraud, she simply lowered her head, hiding the tears that threatened to spill. She knew that if she engaged, if she fought back, the couple would intervene and likely fire her to save face. Her presence in the house was the only thread holding the boy's sanity together, and she refused to sever it for the sake of her own pride. The humiliated feeling burned in her chest, but she channeled it into resolve. She focused on the boy, catching his eye across the room and offering a small, reassuring smile. That smile was a promise. "I am still here. I am not going anywhere. Christian Sanders, in his blind crusade for justice, mistook her submission for weakness. He didn't see the iron will it took to be a doormat for the sake of a child. He didn't understand that for Chloe, this wasn't a job, it was a mission. She was the guardian of a genius child, and she would walk through fire to keep him safe. The scammers, emboldened by Christian's focus on Chloe, piled on. They scolded her in front of him, playing the role of frustrated employers dealing with incompetent staff. She's always so slow, the wife complained, while the husband rolled his eyes. It was a disgusting display of bullying, but Chloe took it. She knew the shocking truth. Every minute Christian spent berating her was a minute. He wasn't looking at the boy's bruised arms or the lock on the basement door. She was the decoy, drawing the predator's fire. This martyrdom did not go unnoticed by the child. He saw Chloe absorbing the poison meant for him. He saw the billionaire treating his mother figure like dirt. It fueled a cold, hard anger in his young heart. He began to modify his plan. It wasn't enough to just expose a couple. He had to show this arrogant man how wrong he was. The social experiment had a new variable to redemption of Chloe Sanchez. The boy knew that vindication had to be public and absolute. Christian Sanders, meanwhile, was growing frustrated by Chloe's lack of reaction. He expected fear, guilt, or defensiveness. Her quiet dignity was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Why stay? Why endure this if she was just a hired hand? He began to watch her more closely, looking for cracks. He saw her slip a cookie into her pocket, evidence of theft? No. Later he saw her slide it to the boy when the couple wasn't looking. It was a tiny crack in his theory, a moment of cognitive dissonance that he quickly dismissed, but the seed was planted. The emotional toll on Chloe was immense. She felt the weight of the betrayal of the system, that this man, who was supposed to help, was only making things worse. She felt the destiny of the boy slipping through her fingers, but she stood firm. One word to describe her right now: resilience. She was a lighthouse in the storm, battered by waves, but refusing to dim her light. She knew that the life-changing moment was coming, and she had to survive until then. As evening approached, Christian's attacks became more personal. He questioned her morals, her upbringing. Chloe finally looked him in the eye, her gaze steady and sad. Some of us do what we must to survive, sir, and to protect what matters. Her voice was soft, but it carried a weight that silenced the room for a second. Christian blinked, taken aback by the sudden depth in the maid's eyes. For a split second, the rich man, poor woman barrier wavered, but his arrogance quickly rebuilt the wall. He didn't know he had just been told the truth. He was just too deaf to hear it. The wicked couple, sensing the stakes, staged a perfect family scene for Christian Sanders that evening. It was a masterclass in fraud, a theatrical performance designed to dazzle the billionaire and hide their rot. They dressed the boy in a stiff, new suit that still had the tags tucked in, and sat him at the head of the table. The table itself was groaning under the weight of expensive food, bought with the very welfare checks they were stealing. They forced Chloe Sanchez to serve them, treating her like a prop in their play, rendering her invisible as they toasted of family values and bright futures. The boy sat there, a silent hostage in this charade. The couple had threatened him earlier one word, and Chloe goes. So he played the part of the shy, grateful son, hiding his genius child intellect behind a mask of mediocrity. He ate the food that tasted like ash in his mouth, watching the scammers fawn over Christian. The couple spun lies about his progress in school, about the tutors they hired which never existed, and the sports he played which he never did. It was a shocking truth hidden in plain sight, a grotesque parody of a loving home. Chloe Sanchez moved around the table like a ghost, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates. Her heart ached as she watched the boy being used as a pawn. She saw the fear in his eyes every time the father put a hand on his Shadera grip that was too tight, too controlling. She wanted to smash the plates, to scream the truth, but she kept her head down. This was the ultimate betrayal, using the victim to validate the abuser. She felt humiliated for him, forced to participate in a lie that imprisoned him. Christian Sanders sat at the center of it all, observing. He ate the food, drank the wine, and listened to the couple's rehearsed speeches. On the surface, it looked perfect, too perfect. His instincts, sharpened by years of hunting corruption, were buzzing. The boy was too quiet. The couple was trying too hard. And the maid, she was the only element that felt real. Her hand shook slightly as she poured the water. Was it guilt or was it fear? The social experiment of the dinner party was revealing cracks in facade, even if Christian couldn't quite name them yet. The couple, drunk on their own performance, began to slip. The mother made a joke about the boy's expensive taste, a slip that didn't align with their earlier story of his humble needs. Christian raised an eyebrow. The father bragged about a vacation they took, forgetting they had claimed to be home caring for the sick child during that period. The boy caught these slips too, his eyes meeting Chloe's for a fleeting second. They were the only two sane people in an asylum run by greed. The climax of the dinner came when Christian asked the boy a direct question about his hobbies. The father answered for him, cutting him off. He loves video games. The man lied. The boy, who had never owned a console, stared at his plate. Chloe Sanchez paused behind Christian's chair, her knuckles white on the serving tray. The silence was deafening. It was a moment of heartbreaking suppression. The boy's true intellect, his love for math and engineering, was being erased to fit the couple's narrative of a normal, high-maintenance dependent. As the dinner concluded, the couple felt triumphant, believing they had fooled the billionaire. But they failed to notice the cold calculation in Christian's eyes. The masquerade had been glossy, but it lacked the warmth of truth. And Chloe Sanchez, the silent servant, had unknowingly become the focal point of Christian's lingering doubt. Why did the boy look at her before doing anything? Why did the maid seem to be the only one breathing in the room? The destiny of the night was shifting. The lie was polished, but the truth was beginning to bleed through. Christian Sanders, sensing the artifice but needing proof, created a kindness test disguised as an accident. As he rose from the table, he deliberately knocked over a crystal goblet of red wine, sending it shattering across the pristine white rug. It was a calculated move to break the script. The reaction was instantaneous and telling. The greedy couple gasped in horror, not for their guest, but for their expensive rug. "You clumsy idiot." The husband almost shouted before catching himself, his face contorted in a mask of suppressed rage. The wife immediately began screeching for the maid, blaming Chloe for placing the glass too close to the edge. In the chaos, it was Chloe Sanchez who acted with grace. She didn't flinch at the insults. She dropped to her knees, not to save the rug, but to check if Christian had been cut by the flying shards. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern, ignoring the wine staining her own uniform. It was a moment of unconditional love for humanity, a reflex of care that could not be faked. The scammers were busy mourning a piece of fabric, while the woman they abused was worried about the person. The genius child watched this unfold, his eyes wide. He saw the contrast, clearly the couple's materialism versus Chloe's humanity. He moved to help her, picking up the larger shards, his small hands working in sync with hers. The couple yelled at him to stop, to let the help do it, but he ignored them. This small rebellion, fueled by his love for Chloe, was a crack in their control. It was a life-changing realization for Christian Sanders, who stood frozen, watching the tableau on the floor. Christian stared down at Chloe Sanchez. She was on her hands and knees, cleaning up a mess she didn't make, while being berated by the people who should have been apologizing. And yet, her primary concern was his safety. The rich man, poor woman dynamic flipped in that moment. She was a noble one, and he felt small for his earlier judgments. This was a test, and she had passed with flying colors, while the couple had failed miserably. The shocking truth hit him: money hadn't bought class, and poverty hadn't stolen her dignity. The couple continued to berate her, calling her clumsy and stupid. "She'll pay for this," the wife hissed. Christian felt a surge of protectiveness he hadn't expected. "It was my fault," he said, his voice cutting through their noise like a blade. "I knocked it over." The couple instantly switched gears, fawning over him, assuring him it was just a rug, their hypocrisy on full display. But Christian wasn't listening to them anymore. He was watching Chloe, who gave him a brief, grateful nod before retreating to the kitchen with the shards. This incident planted a seed of doubt in Christian's mind that could not be uprooted. The billionaire realized he might have been reading the room entirely wrong. The adoption story the couple spun was unraveling. Why was the beloved son helping the maid instead of comforting the parents? Why was the maid the only one with human reflexes? The social experiment of the spilled wine had exposed the moral vacuum of the household. Chloe Sanchez, back in the kitchen, trembled as she washed the wine from her hands. She didn't know she had passed the test. She only knew she had prevented the boy from getting cut. She was unaware that her simple act of kindness had cracked the armor of the man who held their destiny in his hands. Vindication was getting closer, creeping into the fractures of the couple's perfect facade. If you were in that room, whose side would you take? The lines were being drawn, and the battle for the truth had just begun. Intrigued by her quiet dignity, Christian Sanders began to watch Chloe Sanchez closely, his emotional armor beginning to crack. The image of her checking his hands for glass shards while the couple worried about a rug replayed in his mind. He found himself following her with his eyes as she moved through the house, no longer seeing a sullen servant, but a woman of immense resilience. The billionaire, usually so sure of his judgments, felt the uncomfortable itch of instant regret. He realized he had profiled her based on her poverty, a mistake that gnawed at his conscience. He started testing the waters, engaging her in small conversations when the couple wasn't hovering. "You been with them long?" he asked, his tone softer, stripped of its earlier arrogance. Chloe, wary but polite, answered briefly. But in those short exchanges, Christian saw glimpses of intelligence and a deep, simmering sadness. He noticed how her eyes always tracked the boy, how she positioned herself between the child and any potential threat. It wasn't the behavior of a co-conspirator and fraud. It was the behavior of a protector. The shocking truth was slowly coming into focus. The boy, the genius child, noticed a shift in Christian. He saw the billionaire watching Chloe not with suspicion, but with curiosity. The child realized that Christian was smart, maybe not as smart as him, but smart enough to see patterns. He decided to help the process along. He left a complex origami figure on Chloe's cleaning cart, a symbol of the beauty she inspired in him. When Christian found it and asked Chloe about it, she smiled a real, genuine smile and said, "He has magic in his hands." That moment, that shared appreciation for the boy, built a bridge between the rich man, poor woman. Christian's internal monologue was changing. He began to question the couple's narrative. If they were so loving, why did the boy only seem to relax when the maid was near? If the maid was part of the scam, why did she wear shoes with holes in them while the couple wore Gucci? The math of the adoption didn't add up. He felt a growing sense of shame for his earlier insults. He wanted to apologize, but his pride and his need to maintain his cover as the impartial investigator held him back. The social experiment continued in his mind. He observed the couple's harsh tone with Chloe when they thought he wasn't listening. He saw the way they snapped their fingers at her. It made his blood boil. He realized that Chloe Sanchez was enduring a living hell, likely for the sake of the child. This realization transformed his view of her from suspect to victim, and potentially to ally. The unconditional love she displayed was the only real thing in this house of lies. One evening, Christian caught Chloe reading a book from the library, one of the few moments she took for herself. It was a classic, dog-eared and worn. He approached her, expecting her to jump, but she just closed it gently. "I didn't know you liked Dickens," he said. "There is much you don't know, sir," she replied, her voice steady. It was a direct hit. Christian felt the wall between them crumble a little more. He was finding himself drawn to her strength, her mystery. The destiny that brought him here was about more than just numbers. It was about saving people. The couple, oblivious to the subtle shift, continued their performance. But Christian was no longer the captive audience. He was a detective, and Chloe Sanchez had become his primary lead. He needed to get her alone, to break through her fear and get the truth. He didn't know yet that the scammers were watching too, and his growing interest in the maid was painting a target on her back. The storm was about to break, and Christian's newfound empathy would be the catalyst for the final betrayal. The greedy couple, realizing Christian Sanders was growing suspicious and paying too much attention to the maid, decided to execute a ruthless contingency plan. They needed to discredit Chloe Sanchez immediately to ensure that if she ever spoke up, Her words would be dismissed as the lies of a criminal. In a display of pure malice, they staged a theft. The wife planted her diamond necklace spot with welfare funds into Chloe's battered purse. It was a classic move by scammers to eliminate a threat framed the innocent to protect the guilty. The tension in the house snapped when the wife began to scream, "My necklace! It's gone!" The performance was Oscar-worthy. She tore through the living room, overturning cushions, creating a chaotic scene of distress. Christian Sanders, startled, tried to calm her down, but she insisted on calling police or, better yet, searching the staff. "It has to be her," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Chloe. "She's been eyeing it for weeks." The accusation hung in the air, a heavy cloud of betrayal. Chloe Sanchez stood frozen, her face draining of color. She knew instantly what was happening. This was a punishment for the boy's rebellion, for Christian's lingering gazes. It was a heartbreaking realization that her integrity meant nothing against their machinations. When they dumped her purse onto the table, the necklace spilled out, glittering like a serpent among her humble belongings, bus tokens, a worn photo of her parents, and a few crumbled tissues. The shocking truth was twisted into a lie the evidence looked damning. Christian Sanders stared at the necklace. For a moment, his old prejudices flared up. The evidence was right there. The rich man, poor woman narrative, the desperate servant stealing from the masters, was a story he had heard 1,000 times. He looked at Chloe, waiting for a denial, a scream, something. But Chloe remained silent. She looked at the boy, who was watching from the doorway with terror in his eyes. She knew if she fought, they would take it out on him. So she took the fall. Her silence was not an admission of guilt, but a final act of unconditional love. The genius child wanted to run forward, to explain the physics of how the necklace couldn't have been there, to expose a fraud, but Chloe's eyes locked onto his, pleading with him to stay safe. "Don't move. Don't speak." It was a telepathic command. The boy trembled, tears streaming down his face, witnessing the ultimate injustice. The couple smirked, their victory all but assured. They had successfully painted Chloe as a villain, turning Christian's budding respect for her into disappointment. Christian's face hardened. The armor that had begun to crack sealed itself shut again. He felt foolish for trusting her, for thinking she was different. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice icy. Chloe looked at him, her eyes filled with a profound sadness that should have told him everything. "It doesn't matter what I say, does it?" she whispered. It was a statement of humiliated resignation. She accepted the destiny they wrote for her to save the boy from the fallout. The couple demanded she be fired immediately, threatening to press charges if she didn't leave the premises within the hour. It was a calculated mercy. They didn't want the police involved because they feared an investigation into their own lives. They just wanted her gone. Christian, feeling the sting of instant regret for letting his guard down, nodded. "Pack your things," he told Chloe, unable to look her in the eye. The trap had sprung, and the innocent were ensnared. One word for the situation: infuriating. Believing the fabricated evidence, a furious Christian Sanders fired Chloe Sanchez on the spot. His anger wasn't just about the theft, it was about the personal feeling of betrayal. He had allowed himself to see goodness in her, and this proof felt like a slap in the face. He banished her from the house with a voice that brooked no argument. "Get out," he commanded, "and consider yourself lucky we aren't calling the authorities." He didn't see the triumph in the scammer's eyes, he only saw his own shattered judgment. Chloe Sanchez accepted the termination with a quiet devastation. She didn't beg for a job. She begged for the boy. "Please," she whispered to Christian as she passed him, "watch over him. He needs care." Christian dismissed her plea as the manipulation of a thief trying to garner sympathy. He was blind to the shocking truth that she was handing him the torch of guardianship. He turned his back on her, severing the connection that had just begun to form. The scene was heartbreaking. Chloe packed her meager belongings into a plastic bag, her hands shaking. Every item she touched reminded her of the boy a book she read to him, the small toy he fixed for her. She was leaving her heart behind in that house. The couple watched her go with arms crossed, smug satisfaction radiating from them. They had won. They had removed a witness to their fraud and the obstacle to their abuse. The boy stood at the upstairs window, watching Chloe walk down the long driveway. His world was crumbling. The only person who showed him unconditional love was being cast out like garbage. A deep, cold rage settled in his chest. He saw Christian Sanders standing on the porch, the executor of this injustice. In that moment, the child decided that Christian was an enemy, a pawn of the scammers. The genius child wiped his tears. Crying wouldn't bring her back. Action would. Christian felt a hollow victory. He had purged the bad apple, yet the house felt darker, colder. The atmosphere was oppressive. He told himself he did the right thing, protecting the family from a criminal. But why did he feel so sick? Why did Chloe's parting word haunt him, watch over him? It didn't sound like a thief, it sounded like a mother. Instant regret was gnawing at the edges of his conviction, but his pride was a fortress. As Chloe reached the gate, she looked back one last time. She saw the small silhouette in the window and placed her hand over her heart. It was a silent promise, I will not give up on you. She walked out into the cold night, a humiliated woman with no money and no name, but with a resolve that terrified the devil. She was down, but she wasn't out. The life-changing storm was just beginning. Inside, the couple celebrated with a drink, believing their secret was safe. They didn't realize they had just made a fatal tactical error. By removing Chloe, they had removed the only restraint on the boy. They had left the genius child unprotected, yes, but they had also left him unleashed. And he was locked in a house with a billionaire who had the power to destroy them, if only he could be made to see. The countdown to vindication had started. How frustrated are you with Christian right now? Chloe Sanchez walked away from the mansion, tears streaming down her face, blurring the streetlights into streaks of light. She wasn't crying for herself or for the loss of her income, or even the humiliated way she was thrown out. She was heartbroken because she could no longer protect the boy she loved as her own. She knew the scammers would unleash their cruelty now that there was no witness. The thought of him alone in that basement, defenseless against her neglect, was a physical pain in her chest. It was a betrayal of the innocent that she felt powerless to stop. She sat on a bus stop bench, the plastic bag of her belongings at her feet, feeling the crushing weight of the world. She was made against millionaires who would believe her. She thought of going to the police, but she had no proof, and now she had a record of theft against her name. The system was rigged against the poor. But amidst the despair, the unconditional love she felt for the boy burned like a beacon. She couldn't just walk away. She had to find a way to fight. Back at the house, the silence was deafening. The boy sat on his bed, staring at the wall. The couple had already forgotten about Chloe, moving on to plan how to charm Christian into a larger donation for the foundation. They didn't check on the boy. They didn't care. This neglect, usually a source of pain, was now an opportunity. The genius child knew that Chloe's departure was a catalyst he needed. He whispered her name into the darkness, a vow of vindication. Chloe's phone buzzed. It was a draft message she had saved, a photo of the boy smiling, a rare, precious moment. Looking at it, she realized she wasn't just a victim, she was a witness. She knew dates, times, conversations. She knew about the fraud. She might not be in the house, but she had knowledge, and knowledge was power. She wiped her tears. Destiny wasn't finished with her yet. Christian Sanders paced the living room, unable to settle. The victory of catching the thief tasted like ash. He couldn't shake the image of Chloe's face, not angry, but devastated. He replayed the scene in his head, the necklace and the purse. It was too easy, too cliché. A nagging doubt began to whisper in his ear. Was he the billionaire genius, or was he the fool? He walked past the boy's room and heard. Nothing. No crying. No movement. It was unnerving. The separation between Chloe and the boy was a physical distance, but their bond remained unbroken. It was emotional fuel for what was to come. Chloe, alone in the night, prayed for a miracle. The boy, alone in the house, decided to make one. He slid off his bed and moved towards his hidden stash of electronics. The life-changing turn of events was about to be engineered by a child who refused to accept this ending. The night was dark, but it is always darkest before the dawn. Chloe Sanchez stood up from the bench. She wouldn't go home. She would wait. She would watch. She would be ready. The rich man, poor woman story wasn't over. The roles were just being redefined. She was no longer the servant. She was the exiled queen fighting for her kingdom. And her kingdom was one small, brilliant boy, alone with the scammers and the sleeping billionaire. The genius child executed a plan he had mentally rehearsed with Chloe 1,000 times. The house was quiet, the heavy silence of secrets. He crept out of his room, moving like a shadow, his target the smart home hub and Christian Sanders' secure laptop. He knew the couple's passwords. They were laughably simple, based on their own birthdays. He accessed the home security system, a digital record of every sin committed in that house. With trembling fingers that moved at lightning speed, he bypassed the firewalls. He wasn't just a child playing games, he was a prodigy at work. He pulled up the archive footage, the couple hitting him, the couple laughing about the welfare fraud, the wife planting the necklace in Chloe's purse. It was all there, the shocking truth stored in high definition. He compiled the clips into a single, undeniable video file. This was his vindication, the weapon that would slay the giants. He then turned his attention to Christian's laptop. He knew the billionaire used a specific encrypted server for his foundation. The boy hacked it, not to steal, but to deliver. He uploaded the compilation video directly to Christian's desktop, setting it to autoplay upon login. He also sent a copy to the local police precinct's digital tip line, just to be sure. It was a masterstroke of justice. The social experiment was over the data. The risk was enormous. If the couple woke up, if Christian caught him, it would be over. But the thought of Chloe crying at the bus stop drove him on. This was for her. This was the unconditional love returning the favor. He was the ghost in the machine, the invisible hand of karma. He finished the upload and wiped his fingerprints from a keyboard. He retreated to his room, his heart pounding like a drum. He had just pulled off a heist of truth. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the morning sun to trigger the explosion. He imagined the look on the scammers' faces. He imagined Christian's reaction. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a victim. He felt powerful. The house slept on, unaware that its digital soul had been laid bare. The fraud that had sustained the couple's lifestyle was now a digital packet of data waiting to be opened. The boy closed his eyes, visualizing Chloe coming back. He knew she would. Destiny demanded it. The technology was a tool, but love was the architect of this plan. As dawn broke, the digital trap was set. The genius child had turned their own luxury surveillance against them. The couple's obsession with security had become their undoing. The boy smiled, a terrifyingly adult smile. The game was up. Instant regret was about to be served for breakfast. The next morning, Christian Sanders woke up with a heavy feeling of unease. He opened his laptop to check the markets, coffee in hand. Instead of stock charts, a video player launched in full screen. He frowned, confused. Then he pressed play. The video began with the timestamp from yesterday. He watched his blood turning to ice as the wife tiptoed to Chloe's purse and dropped the diamond necklace inside, smirking at a camera she thought was disabled. The shocking truth hit him like a physical blow. He didn't stop there. He watched clip after clip, the couple mocking his stupid questions after he left the room, the couple pushing the boy into the basement, the couple counting the welfare money and laughing about buying a new boat. It was a montage of horror. Christian sat paralyzed, the coffee cup shaking in his hand. He had been played. He had been a fool. And worst of all, he had destroyed the one person who was actually trying to stop it. The betrayal wasn't by Chloe, it was by his own arrogance. His worldview shattered. He prided himself on being a judge of character, a smart billionaire who couldn't be conned. Yet, he had fallen for the suit and the smile, while punishing the woman in rags who held the moral high ground. He saw Chloe's face in his mind, her dignity, her silence, her plea to watch over him. It wasn't manipulation, it was desperation. Instant regret flooded his veins, a toxic mix of shame and fury. He looked up from the screen. The house was quiet. The scammers were likely still asleep, dreaming of their unearned wealth. Christian felt a rage he had never known. He had facilitated this abuse. He had fired the protector. He was complicit. He slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He needed to fix this. He needed justice. But first, he needed to apologize. He ran to the boy's room. The child was sitting on the bed, dressed and waiting. The boy looked at Christian, not with fear, but with expectation. Christian fell to his knees, a life-changing moment of humility. "I saw it," Christian whispered. "I saw everything." The boy nodded slowly. There were no words needed. The barrier between rich man, poor woman, between adult and child, dissolved in the face of the truth. Christian realized the boy had sent the video. The genius child had saved himself because Christian had failed to do it. It was a humbling realization. "I am so sorry," Christian said, tears stinging his eyes. "We need to find her." The boy's face lit up. That was the mission. Vindication for Chloe. Christian grabbed his phone, his hand shaking. He dialed a security team. "Find Chloe Sanchez. Now, use every resource. I don't care what it costs." He was no longer the investigator. He was the penitent crusader. The adoption nightmare was ending, and the hunt for redemption was beginning. Overcome with regret, Christian Sanders raced out of the house, leaving a security team to detain the confused scammers until the police arrived. He jumped into his car, the engine roaring like a beast. He had to find Chloe Sanchez. He realized now that her poverty hid a heart of gold. He desperately needed not just for the boy, but for his own soul. He drove through the wealthy suburbs into the rundown district where the agency said she lived. The contrast was stark, a visual representation of the rich man, poor woman divide he had so callously enforced. He found her small apartment complex, a dilapidated building with peeling paint. He pounded on the door, panic rising in his throat. A neighbor told him she hadn't come home last night. Christian's heart sank. Had she left town? Had she given up? The thought was unbearable. He drove to the bus station, the park, everywhere he could think of. He was a billionaire with the world at his fingertips, yet he felt helpless without her. Destiny was testing him. Finally, he saw her. She was sitting on a park bench near the house, shivering in the morning mist. She hadn't left. She had stayed close, keeping her vigil for the boy. Christian stopped the car and ran towards her. He didn't run with the dignity of a CEO. He ran with the desperation of a man who had lost his way. "Chloe," he shouted. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear, expecting him to be the police coming to arrest her for the theft. When he reached her, he didn't accuse her. He didn't maintain his distance. He dropped to his knees on the grass, ruining his Italian suit. "I know," he gasped. "I know everything. The necklace, the abuse." The boy showed me. Chloe's hands flew to her mouth. The shocking truth was out. Tears of relief flooded her eyes. It was a vindication she had prayed for, but hadn't dared to expect. "I am so sorry," Christian begged, taking her rough hands in his. "I was blind. You were the only one protecting him." Chloe looked at this powerful man, broken before her. She didn't feel triumph, she felt grace. "Is he okay?" was her first question. Even in her moment of victory, her concern was for the child. This unconditional love broke Christian completely. He realized he was looking at the most valuable person he had ever met. "He's waiting for you," Christian said. "We both are." He helped her up, treating her like royalty. The maid and the billionaire walked back to the car, united by a shared purpose. The hierarchy had been destroyed. They were just two people who loved the same child. As they drove back to the house, Christian listened to Chloe's side of the story. He learned about the social experiment of survival she had endured. He learned about the boy's genius. Every word was a brick in the new foundation they were building. The scammers were about to face the music. But in the car, there was only the quiet piece of truth restored. The scene at the house was chaotic. Police cars flashed blue and red lights against the morning sky. The genius child, holding Christian's laptop, stood on the porch like a prosecutor. He had played the footage for the officers. The scammers were in handcuffs, screaming denial, claiming the video was faked, claiming it was conspiracy. But the evidence was irrefutable. The fraud was exposed to the world. Neighbors gathered, watching the perfect family being dragged away in disgrace. It was total humiliated ruin for the couple. Christian Sanders arrived with Chloe Sanchez by his side. When the boy saw her, he broke through the police line and ran into her arms. It was a reunion of pure, heartbreaking joy. They clung to each other, the boy burying his face in her neck, Chloe weeping openly. Christian watched, standing back, giving them their moment. He saw the unconditional love that money couldn't buy. He approached the police captain. "I am pressing charges," he said, his voice steel. "For fraud, for abuse, for everything." The couple saw Christian and started begging. "Mr. Sanders, please." "She's lying. She's the thief." But Christian didn't even look at them. He looked at Chloe. "She is the only honest person here," he announced loud enough for the crowd to hear. It was the ultimate vindication. The rich man, poor woman dynamic was publicly inverted. The billionaires were criminals, the maid was the hero. The child then did something extraordinary. He handed the police a USB drive. "There's more," he said. "Tax evasion, welfare fraud records. It's all here." The crowd gasped. The boy had not just exposed the abuse, he had dismantled their entire financial life. The shocking truth was that the child they called stupid had outsmarted them all. The scammers were shoved into the squad cars, their screams fading into the distance. Christian Sanders then did something that shocked the press gathering on the lawn. He turned to Chloe Sanchez, and in front of the cameras, in front of police, he got down on one knee again. Not proposed marriage yet, but to beg for forgiveness publicly. "I judge you by your clothes," he said. "I was wrong. You are the richest soul I know." Chloe, embarrassed but touched his shoulder. "Stand up, Christian. We have a boy to raise." The justice was swift and poetic. The couple would go to prison. The adoption would be annulled. The house would be seized. But amidst the wreckage of the fraud, a new family was forming. The social experiment had concluded, evil was punished, and good, though battered, had triumphed. The boy looked at Christian and Chloe standing together. He smiled. The calculation was complete. The equation was balanced. The nightmare was over. Instant regret for the villains, eternal gratitude for the heroes. Months later, the courtroom was packed, but not for a trial. It was for an adoption hearing. Christian Sanders sat at the table, looking nervous. Next to him was Chloe Sanchez, looking radiant, and addressed Christian had bought her not as charity, but as a gift to an equal. And between them sat the boy, no longer the welfare case, but the son of a billionaire and the woman who saved him. The judge banged the gavel. Granted. The room erupted in applause. It was a life-changing moment, the legal seal on a bond forged in fire. But the surprises weren't over. Outside the courthouse, Christian turned to Chloe. The rich man, poor woman trope had evolved into a partnership of equals. He knew that his wealth meant nothing without her integrity. He knew the boy needed a mother, and he needed a partner who kept him grounded. He pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, unlike the flashy jewelry of the scammers. "Chloe," he said, "you taught me that true wealth is found in love, not bank accounts. Will you marry us?" Chloe looked at Christian, then at the boy who was grinning from ear to ear. She saw her destiny. She had started as the maid, the invisible protector, and now she was the heart of this new family. "Yes," she whispered. The kiss was the culmination of a journey from betrayal to redemption. It was a shocking truth that love actually wins. The story of the genius child who hacked his way to freedom, and the billionaire who learned humility became a legend. Christian used his foundation to overhaul the welfare system, using the boy's insights to catch other scammers. They became a power trio for justice. The boy flourished, his intellect nurtured by the best schools, but his heart kept warm by Chloe's unconditional love. They visited the old house one last time before selling it. It was empty, a shell the horror it once held. "We beat them," the boy said quietly. Christian put a hand on his shoulder. "No," he corrected, looking at Chloe. "She beat them. We just helped." It was a final vindication. As they walked away, hand in hand, the sun set on the past and rose on a future full of promise. The social experiment was over. The result? Kindness is the ultimate intelligence. And family isn't about blood. It's about who stands in the rain with you when the world kicks you out. Like if you believe love conquers all. This story serves as a powerful reminder that true wealth is never measured by the balance in the bank account, but by the integrity within a soul. Christian Sanders learned the hard way that sometimes the poorest hands offer the richest love, and the quietest voices hold the loudest truths. If you also believe that kindness is the ultimate superpower and that justice is worth fighting for, then you belong here. Subscribe now and become part of a family that values heart over status. Let's make this message heard. Hit that like button to honor Chloe's unwavering courage. Comment below with your honest thought. If you were in Christian's shoes, what would have been your first apology to Chloe? And share this video to spread the warning that the truth always comes to light. But the journey doesn't end here. Our channel is a treasure chest filled with stories of vindication and hope waiting to be rediscovered. Go explore our past videos and find your next favorite tale right now. And to ensure you aren't left behind when the next emotional storm hits, activate that notification bell immediately. The next story is going to be unforgettable, and you won't want to be left out.